Buying a home is a super, super exciting milestone, but it's also a huge financial commitment. So in today's video, I really wanted to talk about the considerations you should be having prior to getting into home ownership and also making sure that those money moves make sense for you. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Jennifer Queen with the Jennifer Queen team and RE/MAX Professionals here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. We are a team of realtors with dedicated administrative staff, and we are working hard to make sure that we are giving clients sound advice and getting them into the right homes or out of the homes for them. So today though, I want to talk a little bit about things to consider, kind of a step-by-step guide of what you need to go through prior to purchasing your home to make sure you are buying a home that will fit comfortably in your budget for years to come. So step one, and this is probably an obvious one for most, but can't just assume that everybody knows, is to assess your current finances. So this is looking at your current rate of savings, at your current cost of living, at your current income, taking into consideration other sources of income. So for some people, there's some supports in place, and there could also be side hustles. We're seeing that a lot more too. So taking all of that income into consideration and looking at your overall financial picture as it stands today. Step number two, now that you have those numbers, and also keep in mind you are looking at your debts as well in that overview, you are now going to look at your ratios. So ratios are something that the banks give a lot of weight to, and for good reason. There is a percentage that seems comfortable for the average person to afford a house based on their total income. And so banks want to make sure you're staying within those healthy ranges. So what these are called are gross debt service and total debt service ratios. So some banks use both, some just use one metric or the other. But I think for your own personal uses, it's a good idea to look at them for your own experience so you know where you're going to fall. So as a general guideline, and again, this is a rough guideline, you might find something different, more comfortable for you. But in general, for your housing expenses to be within the acceptable range, your total debt service ratio should be at or under 32%. So while your gross debt service ratio looks at your housing expenses, your total debt service ratio looks at all of your debts. So this would encompass car payments, loans being repaid, credit card bills, etc. So in the total debt service ratio, now you're looking at that as a portion of your total monthly household income. And this one should not cost more than 40% of your income. And keep in mind, housing is in there too. So it's housing plus all those other debt services. So if you've run the numbers, you think the mortgage you want to take out is well within the range, the monthly payments, when you plug them into those online calculators, combined with your additional debts that you might be carrying, and you're still around that 32% or under 40, depending on which ratio you're using, those numbers are still comfortable for you, then let's look at going to the next step. So step three is establishing a budget that is comfortable. So the bank is going to tell you that you can afford one thing, however, what you are comfortable with is another thing. Of course, unless you think that what you're comfortable with is more than what the bank would lend to you, then that's a whole different discussion. But in general, what I find is the bank will give people a pre-approval for a pre-specified amount, and oftentimes they try to spend well under that, which is totally fine. I appreciate the fiscal responsibility. But when you are establishing a budget for housing costs, keep in mind you're not just paying that monthly mortgage. Now you are going to also be paying things like property taxes, utilities, homeowner insurance, perhaps condo fees if you're living in a condominium. There's private mortgage insurance tacked on there for some, depending on the size of your down payment. And of course, other miscellaneous things like upkeep of a home. What I like to recommend to people that are considering buying a home and they're realizing that they're new monthly payment is likely going to be higher than what they're currently paying, is to already get in the mindset and practice of making that payment. So let's say you are renting a condo right now and it's about $1,500 a month with utilities included, and you think after all your calculations the house you want to buy is going to be around $2,000 a month in a mortgage. Start setting that additional $500 aside, put it in an account, sock it away somewhere you can't touch it. Again, you can use this for the down payment later on. It can be a nice little bonus stash of cash you have to access. But getting in the practice of doing that now to see if those payments are comfortable for you is a really good practice, because it might turn out 6 months down the road that $500 additional that you've been setting aside is not a comfortable amount. It's not sustainable. You're finding that maybe you didn't quite get your budget perfect the first time around. And it's better to find that out prior to buying a home than when you are now in the home and you have substantial costs should you decide it's not affordable. You need to turn around and sell it, or you're put into a position where you have to start getting creative and having tenants, which might completely defeat the purpose of having a home to yourself. Step number 4, factor in the cost of home ownership. So we've talked a little bit, I touched upon it, about setting aside some maintenance costs, but in general, a rough rule of thumb, unless you're buying a brand new home, but even then I still think it's good practice, is to start put about 1 to 3% into the home every year. So budget 1 to 3% of the home's purchase price to be working on the home. So for instance, if you buy a $500,000 home, having $5,000 set aside kind of as a bare minimum to be reinvested back into the property every year is a good rule of thumb. Now, this doesn't mean you have to spend the $5,000 all at once. Some people save up for a few years and put in a new kitchen. Some people use that money and put on a new roof. It's kind of just money going back into the property. It's a good rough rule of thumb. Of course, like I said, when you're buying new, you might not have as many of these expenses, although buying new, a lot of the time you're still working on landscaping, decking, window coverings, those sorts of things. So a good rule of thumb is to set 1 to 3% aside every year. Step number 5 is calculating your down payment. This is probably something you already know, but I still think worth touching upon. It's good to not have any surprises along the process. In Canada, you need a minimum of a 5% down payment when you are buying a home here. And if you are paying less than 20%, then you are going to have to pay some mortgage insurance premiums. So CMHC is the most common and likely one you've heard of before. So essentially it's an additional premium you pay at closing. However, you don't have to pay it in one lump sum. What some people do is they just rope it into the monthly mortgage payments. So there's an additional premium being paid every month. So it's spread out over time. Talk to your lender though, see what's right for you. And again, that's only if you're paying less than 20% down. If you're paying 20% or more as a down payment, then you aren't subjected to those premiums anymore. But in addition to your down payment, I want you to put aside some closing costs to be safe. A rough rule of thumb, again, at least in Winnipeg, is about 2%. It really does depend though on purchase price and a variety of other factors, but as a rough rule of thumb, set aside 2% for that purchase. It should cover your land transfer, taxes, legal fees, etc. But do ask your realtor for their assessment of what reasonable closing costs are going to be for the particular home you are buying, because we can narrow that down a lot more for you. Step number 6, although this is probably a step you've already done prior to this in calculating your numbers, especially with those debt service ratios, is the online mortgage calculators. Get really familiar with them. See what the difference in down payment makes to your bottom line. My favorite still personally is the Rate Hub calculator. I'll link that in the comment section below. I find it to be the most accurate, and it gives you options of other lenders and what the current rates are that are being offered, just so you can kind of get a range and realistic expectation of what you will be paying monthly. They also have a really good land transfer tax calculator too, so worth checking out. But a lot of the time these calculators can capably spit out a number that they think would be a reasonable pre-approval amount for you. or even get you just started at looking at the monthly mortgage payments, what portion is contributed to interest, what is going to principal, and what's going to your premium. Step number 7 is get pre-approved. So there are some surprises in store for you if you believe that the interest rates you're paying is what you qualify at. I really apologize. Maybe I should have talked about this earlier in the video, but you need to know about the mortgage stress tests. I'm sure that rings a bell. I'm sure you probably heard about it, but if you're not familiar with it yet, essentially what a mortgage stress test is a rule that was instituted in 2016, and essentially it says, and this is current for today, but of course if mortgage rates go down it will change, but say you are getting a mortgage at 5% interest today, you still have to qualify for your mortgage as if you were paying 7%. It's currently the rate plus 2%. Of course, if the rate is much lower, then the benchmark is 5.25%, but right now we're above that. So you'd have to qualify 2% higher than what the interest rates are currently at. While a mortgage calculator might tell you, hey, this is what you can afford at this rate, you still have to go to the bank and do that process so that you know what the true upper limit is. Honestly, I know a lot of people really hated these stress tests when they first came into effect, but in all honesty, it was very irresponsible. There were some whispers at that time that interest rates were going to be going up, and the Canadian government just wanted to be sure that they were lending responsibly. And honestly, I think it has saved us a world of hurt as the interest rates did start climbing. We didn't start to see these people falling out of their mortgages because the stress tests had already taken a lot of that fluctuation into consideration. Another consideration too, so step number 8 is I want you to consider your long-term financial goals before you go and take out a mortgage. So I know this might sound counterintuitive, but it's essential to ensure that homeownership really does align with your overall financial plan and doesn't hinder your ability to save for retirement, save for emergencies, or other important life events. Is homeownership right for you? Also, how long do you plan to be in this home? If you're planning on being somewhere for less than 5 years, it's a plan you might want to reevaluate, but talk to your realtor. It really depends on your market. Every market is super local, so you need to talk to somebody with experience in your market. And should I add here, if you don't have a realtor here in Winnipeg, feel free to reach out to my team. Step number 9 is be realistic. I see it more and more nowadays where we're seeing first-time home buyers that are coming in and they expect a beautifully renovated home. They don't want to do any projects, don't want to touch anything. And I get it. There's more dual income households. Pretty much all of my first-time home buyers have been this year. So I get it. You're busy, you're working, whatnot. However, there is something to be said to sacrifice in some areas, at least cosmetically, because there is equity to be gained if you're willing to take on a few projects. And if you keep waiting for the perfect properties, those are the ones that always sell at a premium, and you're going to be in those bidding wars and things get competitive. So in all honesty, just setting realistic expectations, saying maybe this part of the home is really important to me. I really need this to be renovated, but I can live with this. You're gonna come out far further ahead, far less stretched financially, and that's really the greatest win of all. It's always a good idea to leave some financial cushion in your budget so that you have that peace of mind. You're able to continue saving and you're able to handle what life throws at you, should life throw things at you, say a pandemic, right? But it's always good to be buying well within your budget and not pushing the limit to get the prettiest, newest house out there. So by following these steps, I think you can accurately at least start the process of getting your mortgage pre-approval in place and getting into something that is comfortable for you. And if you ever need a recommendation for a mortgage broker, please feel free to reach out. We have brokers that we really, really recommend and trust wholeheartedly. And their goal is honestly to educate more than sell you a product that's not going to work for you. They come from a place of wanting to educate just as we do on our team. And that's who we want to align with. So be sure to reach out. I'm happy to pass your name along to them so they can give you a legitimate assessment as to what would be a reasonable expectation of what you can afford in this market. Again, I'm Jennifer Queen with the Jennifer Queen team and RE/MAX Professionals here in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Thank you so much for watching today. If you found value in this content, please be sure to hit that like button. It does help me to determine just what to film next. And also, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We are recording a ton of content for this upcoming year, so we'd love for you to see it all. Take care.